Drug wars. They've been declared on local, regional, and national levels.
We've seized their heroin.
69 tons of marijuana.
We are not going to allow the cartels to take over the United States.
I have authorization to fire into your vessel.
En 2011, un grupo de personalidades mundiales, incluidos 7 expresidentes, creó la Comisión Global de Políticas de Drogas para poner fin a una guerra contra las drogas que cumplía 40 años. Pero es más fácil iniciar una guerra que terminarla. Es junio de 1971 y el presidente Richard Milhouse Nixon tiene ganas de pelear.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
That was a time where you had both rising levels of sort of crime, and there was more sort of agitation around civil rights and all of this. You also had the hippies, and you had marijuana, you had the counterculture. And Richard Nixon saw himself as speaking for the silent majority, the silent middle class.
¿Cómo respondió un país que ya peleaba una guerra en Vietnam? Con otra guerra, contra las drogas, para combatir el consumo de narcóticos ilegales entre su población.
What really tipped Nixon over was starting in 1970. There became a tremendous amount of intravenous heroin use in Vietnam, and that really kicked him over.
I shall soon propose a revision of the entire federal criminal code, which will give us tougher penalties against drugs and against crime.
Pero la guerra contra las drogas no quedaría confinada a los Estados Unidos. Para detener la producción y el suministro de narcóticos ilegales, el gobierno estadounidense buscó la ayuda del resto del mundo.
The American government convinced the United Nations and the other governments that the main goal for United Nations would be in the area of drugs to zero drugs, to avoid any kind of drug. And secondly, that the instrument to get this goal was repression, war on drugs.
Las convenciones sobre drogas de la ONU llevaron a la prohibición global de la producción, el transporte, la venta y la posesión de cualquier droga clasificada como ilegal. Y estableció una actitud hacia los narcóticos que ha durado décadas.
So in the crusade for a drug-free America, the next step is to enforce a policy of zero tolerance of illegal drug use. So when we say no to drugs, it'll be clear that we mean absolutely none.
Pero a pesar de los enormes y continuos esfuerzos de las autoridades, la demanda de drogas ilegales ha seguido aumentando. El uso de heroína se disparó a principios de los 70. Y luego vino la cocaína.
The government was completely unprepared for the explosive growth of the drug problems. I think we totally misunderstood cocaine.
Originalmente Colombia era el país donde se procesaba, pero la producción estaba en Bolivia y en Perú. Después también se empezó a cultivar en Colombia y los carteles de la droga se fueron volviendo muy poderosos.
El apetito insaciable de los Estados Unidos por la cocaína convirtió a criminales como Pablo Escobar en los más ricos y poderosos. El cártel de Escobar contrabandeaba 15 toneladas de cocaína al día a los Estados Unidos. En 1989, la revista Forbes lo declaró el 7º hombre más rico del mundo, con una fortuna de $25.000 millones. César Gaviria era el presidente de Colombia durante la lucha del Estado contra Escobar.
Escobar tenía una red clandestina muy grande, era impresionantemente poderoso, la gente le tenía mucho temor. Más que corrupción, la gente le tenía intimidada a toda la sociedad.
La política de Escobar para tratar con las autoridades era plata o plomo, un soborno o una bala. Y cuando los gobiernos de los Estados Unidos y de Colombia finalmente lo enfrentaron, la lucha convirtió a Colombia en la capital del homicidio, con más de 52,000 muertes violentas en 2 años. Ni siquiera el presidente quedó inmune.
Una de estas organizaciones alimentada por el narcotráfico tuvo a mi hermano secuestrado bajo tierra sin poderse mover durante 3 meses sin cambiarse la ropa. Salió completamente traumatizado, paralizado. Fue una cosa muy traumática. Hace un par de años las FARC, que son hoy el principal cartel de droga de Colombia, mató a mi hermana tratando de secuestrarla para convertirla en un rehén y en una persona con la que pudieran hacer una negociación política. Y esto ocurre en todas las familias colombianas. O sea, todos han sido víctimas o de la guerrilla o del narcotráfico, y esa guerrilla está cada vez alimentada por droga.
Finalmente, Escobar fue abatido por la policía en diciembre de 1993. Aún así, el problema de las drogas en los Estados Unidos y Colombia continuó tras la caída del patrón.
The death of Pablo Escobar and the working in the United States with Colombia to get him out and killed was a kind of boost to those efforts. But I don't think anyone in the supply reduction area ever felt that was going to end the problem.
La demanda continuó después de la muerte de Escobar, y también el suministro. La etapa siguiente en la guerra contra las drogas fue otro intento a gran escala de erradicarlas desde la raíz. El Plan Colombia del presidente Bill Clinton.
What I tried to do was to focus on every aspect of the problem. I tried to empower the Colombians, for example, to do more militarily and police-wise because I thought that they had to. 30% of their country was in the hands of the narco-traffickers.
Los Estados Unidos gastaron miles de millones de dólares en operaciones militares en Colombia para erradicar las plantaciones de coca y cortar así el flujo de cocaína al país.
Colombia es el único país del mundo que fumiga aéreamente los cultivos de droga. Es un tipo de fumigación que destruye mucho todos los cultivos aledaños.
It's a war against people who try just to earn their living growing some plant. They would like to grow something else if they would receive the same money. So I mean, you cannot make a war against drugs without knowing that doing so, you are making a war against people.
Cuando el Plan Colombia empezó, había 8 departamentos donde había sembrados de coca. Hoy hay 24 o 28, alguna cosa así.
Well, obviously, if the expected results was that we would eliminate serious drug use in America and eliminate the narco-trafficking networks, it hasn't worked.
Hoy, el comercio ilegal de drogas asciende a $320 mil millones al año. Y sin leyes o gobiernos que regulen este mercado clandestino, las armas y la violencia se han convertido en el método de control más efectivo.
Eu sei o quanto é perigoso ir de helicóptero a algumas favelas. Você vai desviando, porque se acharem que é polícia, os traficantes atiram.
Como presidente de Brasil, Fernando Cardoso siguió el pensamiento predominante en su época y apoyó la guerra contra las drogas. Durante su mandato, se estableció una nueva Agencia Nacional Antidrogas. Ahora, 8 años después, como presidente de la Comisión Global de Políticas de Drogas, vuelve para ver él mismo las consecuencias de la lucha contra los narcóticos en favelas como esta.
Let me tell you very frankly, when I went to visit some of the favelas in a very violent part of Rio, I was a little bit afraid. I had no security, because a precondition of being accepted into these neighborhoods is to go without guns. They have the guns, not me.
Há 60 anos era 22, 32.
Arma.
É. Aí veio, há 40 anos já começou 8, pistola, 12 de cano cerrado. Aí depois veio fuzil, metralhadora, HK, AK-47 e assim vem...
Ou seja, para você faz uma ligação direta entre o tipo de arma, a entrada da arma e a mudança do tráfico.
É isso aí. Cada vez que mudava de um tipo de arma para o outro, era outro traficante, era outra pessoa, era outros...
Isso aumentava também a capacidade de venda e tal ou não?
Aumentava mais a criminalidade.
A criminalidade, né? A matança.
Mais a matança.
Moro numa localidade que estava tendo guerra entre facções rivais. Aí eu saí com a minha namorada, eu tinha ido a uma festa. Foi a hora que aconteceu. Eu tomei um tiro, não sei da onde, não vi da onde. As pessoas que pagam, as pessoas mesmo da comunidade que não tem nada a ver, sempre são os que levam sempre a pior. Aí fiquei desse jeito. Tinha 18, 19 anos.
When I was in favelas, what struck me was, first of all, the humanitarian situation. People. It's not difficult to understand how violence and use of drugs is, devastating people. It's terrible. When I was in office in Brazil, of course I was aware of the situation of drugs, but I was convinced that through repression to be possible to stop the production of drugs. But I was wrong at the time.
Pero el sufrimiento que se vive en las favelas de Río no es nada comparado con la violencia desatada en México. La batalla para adueñarse de las lucrativas rutas del tráfico hacia los Estados Unidos se ha salido totalmente de control.
The Mexican president understood that the situation was very bad because of drug battles, and he decided to confront.
La iniciativa Mérida de los Estados Unidos, una versión en México del Plan Colombia, ha visto al expresidente Calderón gastar más de $1,000 millones en la guerra contra las drogas desde 2008. Más de 50,000 soldados y policías participan activamente en la lucha contra los cárteles. Pero como sucedió en Colombia, la violencia ha estallado por la lucha de los cárteles contra la policía, el ejército y entre sí.
It's President Calderón's decision to declare war on the cartels back in 2006 and to use the army against them that I think has generated the violence. I think that the war has created the situation. The situation did not create the war. The problem with this is that the Mexican military is not trained for this. It's not trained for police missions, and this is a police task. And you're asking it to fight a war it cannot win, and it knows it is not winning. And so the military go in and they shoot. That's what soldiers do. All of this has been going on now for 4 or 5 years, and it's getting worse and worse and worse.
Desde que el expresidente Calderón le declaró la guerra a las drogas en 2006, se han producido más de 47,000 homicidios vinculados a las drogas en México. Los cárteles apuntan cada vez más a funcionarios electos, periodistas y miembros del sistema judicial. El gobierno está empezando a perder el control de regiones enteras.
Que este problema no lo vamos a resolver solo los mexicanos, que los mexicanos debemos reclamarle enérgicamente a los Estados Unidos y a los otros grandes países consumidores que tomen una mayor responsabilidad en la solución de este tema.
Los Estados Unidos siempre han liderado la guerra contra las drogas desde el frente, en su país y en el exterior. Pero 5 décadas de dependencia de la fuerza policial y el hecho de que los Estados Unidos continúan siendo el mayor consumidor de drogas ilegales han tenido un efecto devastador en la Tierra de la Libertad.
Using illegal drugs is against the law. Doing drugs, you risk everything, even your freedom. If you do drugs, you will be caught. And when you're caught, you will be punished. Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
You know, the thing about the United States, we have less than 5% of the world's population, but almost 25% of the world's incarcerated population, roughly about 2.3 million people behind bars tonight. Now, what's the number one thing driving that? It's the war on drugs.
Un kilo de cocaína pura cuesta $1,000 cuando sale de una plantación colombiana. Pero al llegar a las calles de los Estados Unidos, puede valer más de $170,000.
The illegality of drugs creates a situation where they're expensive. Now, if you're a wealthy person, then maybe you can afford your own addiction. But the vast majority of street users resort to crime or prostitution or their own drug dealing to support their own addiction.
Un consumidor de heroína o cocaína tiene que gastarse hasta 10 veces más por semana que un consumidor de alcohol o tabaco.
It's not that cocaine, heroin, marijuana cost any more than alcohol or tobacco to produce. Think about it. If tomorrow people could get heroin or cocaine legally from a store, and tomorrow you could only get alcohol or cigarettes from the black market, then all of a sudden very few people would be committing crimes in order to support their heroin or cocaine habit, and lots of people would be committing crimes to support their alcohol or tobacco habit.
What the war on drugs has done is it's created this massive prison industrial complex in America. In 1970, there were about 330,000 prisoners in the U.S. Now there are 2.3 million, and we somehow consider that normal. 2.3 million prisoners is more than any other country in the history of the world ever. We have more prisoners than China, and they have 1 billion more people than we do. We have more prisoners than soldiers, but there are more prison guards than there are U.S. Marines. This level of incarceration has just taken on a life of its own.
We know that people can be rehabilitated, but the truth is, most of these people who are minor offenders who get sent to prisons get no rehabilitation.
If you didn't have a drug habit going in, you leave going with a drug habit. There was so much drugs in prison, it was unbelievable. You could get any kind of drug you want in prison. If you can't control drug use in a maximum security prison, how could you control drugs in a free society?
No hace falta mirar más allá de Washington para ver el efecto que la guerra contra las drogas está teniendo en regiones enteras en Estados Unidos. En 1950, la ciudad de Baltimore tenía más de 1 millón de habitantes. Hoy cuenta con poco más de la mitad. Hay 50,000 edificios abandonados y casi el 10% de los residentes son adictos a alguna droga ilegal.
I can remember the night that my sister was burned. My mother's house caught fire. It was a result of my youngest brother being high for heroin. So she lived for 3 weeks and she died. And that night that we buried her, a friend of the family came past and he told me, he said, try this. And I said, what is that? He said, just try it, it'll make you feel better. It was like this warm feeling just went through my whole body. And it was like, where has this been all my life, you know? And what it was heroin. I think before I realized it was a problem, it was like years had went past. I lost everything. I would go in department stores and I would steal. And I got locked up a couple times. By the time I had got to that point, I was really tired. You know, I wanted a way out, but I didn't know how, you know, or what I was going to do to stop.
There are 600,000 people in this city. In 2007, there were 100,000 arrests. The numbers are staggering when you begin to think about what that means for people. If you have a criminal conviction, generally you are excluded from any support for housing. You are excluded for support for education, and you're not able to get an ever-increasing array of jobs because of your conviction. The reality is that you return to the drug trade. And the drug trade begins to occupy entire communities.
In the neighborhood I policed, men who are born there have about a 12% chance of getting murdered in their lifetime. It seems like these problems are far more important than some sort of futile goal of creating a drug-free society. People should care more about all these deaths, and by and large, the vast majority are related to prohibition.
We could have fighting and killing over cigarettes if we made it a felony to sell a cigarette or to smoke one. So we legalized it. If all you do is try to find a police or military solution to the problem, a lot of people die and it doesn't solve the problem.
Pero las políticas represivas contra las drogas y sus graves consecuencias se extienden más allá de América. En medio del caos de la guerra, Afganistán ha surgido como el principal productor de heroína en el mundo.
Afghanistan has become like the Walmart of dope. The quantities of drugs that are moving out of Afghanistan regularly are simply colossal. They are unimaginable. They make the quantities that Pablo Escobar moved look like child's play.
A major use of the enormous profits from the production of poppies and therefore heroin goes to the Taliban to finance their illicit operations in subjugating people and in punishing people.
Pero los esfuerzos de los Estados Unidos para cortar el financiamiento del Talibán, erradicando las cosechas de amapola, han llevado a los productores a los brazos de los insurgentes.
In this incredibly insecure, lethally uncertain environment, the one crop that they could depend on to bring in enough money to live off, the United States came in to help destroy that.
And of course, once they had lost their source of livelihood, they were then much more open to being persuaded by a Taliban recruitment officer here to take a rifle, take some dollars for the day, and go and shoot at British, American, Afghan soldiers.
It really just contributed massively to getting us to where we are today in Afghanistan, the mess that we have today.
Go, go, go! Just cut round with it.
The thing that sticks in my mind was a direct order to find pictures of burning opium. How can any military task involve taking a picture of burning opium? And I think it is indicative of who was requesting this. This was someone whose prime motivation was counter-narcotics rather than the counterinsurgency campaign or the benefit and well-being of the people of Afghanistan.
Durante la presidencia de Obama, la política antinarcóticos oficial en Afganistán se ha alejado de la erradicación. Pero ante el anuncio de la retirada de las tropas de los Estados Unidos y la OTAN en 2014, aumentan los llamamientos para erradicar la amapola, y no solo desde Occidente.
С коллапсом Советского Союза проблема наркопотребления пошла в гору. На эту тенденцию наложился рост наркопроизводства, взрывной рост наркопроизводства в Афганистане с 2001 года.
Russia wants to take serious action. and has been very vocal in the last year calling for a wide-scale eradication program in Afghanistan. They find it inconceivable that the United States thinks that the biggest threat emanating from Afghanistan is terrorism. They say the biggest threat emanating from Afghanistan is narcotics.
Y los políticos rusos de hoy se inspiran en el modelo represivo establecido por los Estados Unidos en la década de los 90.
США завершила реализацию так называемого «План Колумбия», в соответствии с которым было у них соглашение между США и Колумбией по вопросам как эрадикации посевов, уничтожения лабораторий и иным мероприятиям, направленным на искоренение наркопроизводства. Мне кажется, это хороший опыт Соединенных Штатов Америки, который нам, России, следовало бы самым активным образом применять на практике.
A finales de 2010, fuerzas estadounidenses y rusas realizaron una redada en un laboratorio de Afganistán. La influencia de Rusia en la guerra contra las drogas en Afganistán continúa creciendo.
As we leave and transition, which will be delicate enough anyway, if in that window of opportunity of transition, those who wish to push the counter-narcotics agenda get their way, and we do see a short, sharp attempt to eradicate poppy, I think that will spell disaster for the country. And a return to the disruptive anarchy that spawned 9/11 and what we came here to rectify.
Get on the ground, now! Now! Now!
Los medios ortodoxos sobre cómo lidiar con el suministro de narcóticos perduran. ¿Pero qué ha hecho la guerra contra las drogas para frenar la demanda?
This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs.
During the time I was in Congress, we tried almost everything we could think of. We got corporations to donate an enormous amount of money to go into public advertising, hard-hitting advertisements that showed kids the terrible things that would happen with drugs.
Toda a propaganda antidroga da minha época era baseada no fato de que a droga destruía o ser humano.
That had a problem because most of the people who were using drugs weren't dead and they liked to use the drugs, and so it had a credibility problem.
You're gonna die if you mess with dope. Nobody can handle it. Take a look at the nearest junkie and figure it out.
E aí, o jovem questiona todo o discurso que ele ouviu até então.
Hey, kiddies, gather around. The man with the goodies is here. Dig, everybody. LSD.
Então, nesse momento, fica claro que há uma hipocrisia generalizada na campanha antidrogas, normalmente feita por pessoa que nunca experimentou a droga. Então, essas pessoas vêm com esse discurso moralista, conservador, e acham que vão impressionar muita gente, não vão.
Come on, one drag won't hurt you.
That's not what I heard. I heard it can really mess you up. You heard wrong. Come on, give it a try. It's cool. You don't know what you're doing. Besides, smoking pot's illegal.
Or maybe you're just a little
The
too
moralization of these campaigns produced a polarization between the users and the believers of the campaign messages, who believe that anyone who uses the drug is an addict and a criminal. And politicians have fallen into this trap too.
You point your finger at our generation and you say, well, you had alcohol, you had martinis and so forth, and that was your crutch. Well, maybe so. But then what makes you so much more noble by just deciding to have a different kind of crutch? I'd like to see a generation that didn't have any crutch at all.
Hoy, una generación después de que el presidente Reagan dejara su cargo, la ONU estima que existen 230 millones de consumidores de drogas en el mundo. El 90% no está clasificado como problemático. Y aún así, la cuestión de cómo lidiar con estas personas ha dividido a los políticos desde que el presidente Nixon declarara la guerra contra las drogas.
Nixon's attitude about drugs was very interesting. His instincts were all law enforcement, all punishment, no sympathy, but a very strong commitment to dealing with the problem. Nixon said I could say anything I wanted to say about drugs except one thing. I couldn't support decriminalization of marijuana. He said he was elected president, not me, and if I came out and supported decriminalization, I was history.
60% of the Berkeley voters approved the marijuana ordinance. It specifically told the Berkeley police not to make marijuana arrests without first getting city council approval.
Decriminalization was the permissive pole of drug policy, and it said essentially that there would be no criminal penalty for possession of marijuana. And we had a presidential commission to look at this issue. Nixon appointed the people, and they came out and supported it.
We have made several recommendations to the Congress, to the President, and to the American people. The federal recommendations are as follows. First, possession for personal use is no longer a criminal offense. Second, non-profit distribution of small amounts should no longer be a criminal offense.
So Nixon dissociated himself from the commission report that he'd put together, and he just said, that's not going to happen on my watch.
Pero Nixon tenía problemas más importantes que la guerra contra las drogas. Fue el escándalo Watergate, y no los narcóticos, lo que acabó con su presidencia.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
So Nixon is gone and Ford is there. He doesn't have this guidance for me. So I came out and supported decriminalization. And I was a poster drug czar for decriminalization at that point.
Con la elección de Jimmy Carter en 1977, la despenalización pasó al frente de la agenda política dominante. Se vislumbraba el final de la guerra contra las drogas.
When I was president, we had the same problem with drug production and distribution and consumption that we presently face. We tried as best we could to minimize the emphasis on criminal punishment. And I made a major statement to the U.S. Congress asking for changes in the law.
And decriminalization spread to 10 U.S. states by 1979. And it would look like the future. It looked like that things were going to go that direction. Then the parents' movement came in, and it stopped, and nobody decriminalized again.
Durante la presidencia de Reagan, una política de tolerancia cero reavivó la guerra contra las drogas y afianzó las actitudes políticas represivas durante años.
President Reagan and his wife adopted the drug program as the #1 issue for her to proclaim. She had a phrase, just say no.
Just say no so loud that everyone around you can hear. And if you do that, drugs won't stand a chance.
And she made it clear that her prohibition against drugs included marijuana and everything else. So I don't think there's any doubt that President Reagan made a profound impact then on the consciousness of our country, and I think he also shaped the opinion of many members of our Congress.
The truth is, the vast majority of members of Congress still take a very hard position on drugs. We're against legalizing drugs. We want tougher penalties for drug users, and particularly for people who sell and traffic in the drugs. We want to maintain the long terms, the prison terms and penalties that are there.
En 2009, hubo 1.600.000 arrestos relacionados con las drogas en los Estados Unidos. 1.300.000 de ellos por posesión de drogas. Más de la mitad relacionados con la marihuana.
I personally fully disagree with the U.S. saying that they are being successful just because they have more people in jail or they have more sentences against traffickers than they had 20 or 10 or 5 years ago. That is not a good way to say that a policy is successful.
This project over the past 22 months has led to the arrest of more than 2,200 individuals.
We've seized their heroin, taken their money.
41 kilograms of cocaine.
$154 million in United States currency.
It's every year the same. They are showing some data, and the data shows more people in prison. We are destroying more plantations of cocaine, so on and so forth.
If they had less violence and less consumption, and well, that would be a success. But what they have now, and the measure of success they have, is wrong.
We have spent hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars on the war on drugs, which has been a complete, total failure.
The problem is that politicians are basically unwilling to spend political capital on this issue, as they know it's unpopular with the public and the media.
What is his position, as you understand it, on drug use? Apparently he has a somewhat libertarian view on that subject, which you, I think, are arguing is not a Kentucky view.
I had a senior law enforcement official tell me that in his judgment, up to a quarter of the White House staff, when they first came in, had used drugs in the last 4 or 5 years.
Accusations about the use of illegal drugs are flying around the Democratic presidential campaign again.
What we have in this issue is similar to what we have in pornography. This is chemical pornography.
The allegation is that while governor, he hosted parties where drugs were used, a violation of state law.
Most politicians, they're afraid of what the political ads will be that their opponents will run in the upcoming election. They're afraid of being accused of being soft on crime or soft on drugs, and that's why oftentimes the politicians lag behind the public. Why? Because the politicians are still stuck.
The party's over. The party's over for drug dealers. We can change the status quo, we can win the war, but we've got to start the war on drugs.
The U.S. just ignores the problem. In this society, it's almost prohibited, banned to talk about the problem.
So you have to break taboo.
En 2011, la Comisión Global de Políticas de Drogas se propuso corregir los errores del pasado y cambiar la propia naturaleza de la guerra contra las drogas.
I'm not proposing to replace war by peace. I propose to replace war by a smarter fight. A fight using other instruments, more intelligent instruments to convince people not to use drugs.
So break the taboo and bring in the public debate what experiences in some countries could help to find better solutions.
Portugal ha adoptado un valiente enfoque ante el problema de las drogas. En 2001 se despenalizó el consumo de estas, lo que significa que sus consumidores ya no serán sancionados únicamente por posesión.
To see the progress made in Portugal is astonishing, because in Portugal they decided to decriminalize the use of all kinds of drugs, and not just marijuana.
Decriminalized, people do not go to prison, do not go to court even, but there's a penalty that can be applied, and there's a clear sign of disapproval for drug use.
Si alguien es arrestado con drogas en Portugal, no se le envía a los tribunales. En lugar de eso, debe comparecer ante una comisión disuasiva formada por psiquiatras y trabajadores sociales.
The main concern is to understand what are the needs of that people intercepted by police forces using drugs or carrying drugs for personal use, and what do they need? What kind of help can we provide?
The most fundamental step we need to take is to realize that addiction is a medical problem, and therefore addicts need to be treated medically, not criminally. If we accept that basic principle, we overcome most of the disagreements about drug policy.
In Portugal, after decriminalization, the prevalence of drug use among youngsters has declined in the last decade of every illicit drug.
En 1997, la adicción a las drogas era la principal preocupación política en Portugal. Ahora, tras una década de despenalización, el tema ha sido relegado al puesto 13 y apenas aparece en la agenda política. En otros lugares, se han tomado medidas aún más radicales. En los 90, Suiza enfrentó una epidemia de SIDA que se extendía rápidamente entre los consumidores de heroína.
It was clear in Switzerland that repression was not the way, that repression was a part of the problem, that repression was a cause of the dissemination of AIDS, that repression was a cause of the deaths of young people by overdoses.
Como presidenta, Ruth Dreifuss, miembro de la Comisión Global, exigió una serie de soluciones drásticas para la epidemia, incluyendo la prescripción médica de jeringas limpias y heroína a personas incapaces de dejar su adicción.
How can you speak with people about the problem of drugs if they are addicts, if they are under the threat to be arrested? It's absolutely clear that you have to go to the people, and in order to go to the people, you have to accept in a certain way the people as they are.
En Suiza, la cantidad de consumidores de drogas inyectables con VIH-Sida se ha reducido más de un 50% en 10 años. Y el modelo que antepone la salud al castigo está tomando fuerza.
I think there should be safe places where people who have addiction could come and not think they're going to be arrested and will have basic needs met. I have experience with this, including personal experience. I had a brother who was addicted to cocaine. So I know a lot about this. I understand more than most people do what is involved.
Well, dealing with human beings. So we are not just dealing with criminals. The users, very often, they want to escape from the situation. They have no instruments. So why not to give a lift to them?
Who are the addicts? Our children. I mean, people we love, people we would like really to bring back in the normal life.
The American experience with alcohol prohibition provides a wonderful analogy for the problems that we're experiencing today with drug prohibition. By the end of alcohol prohibition, more people were drinking alcohol than at the beginning of alcohol prohibition. And at the same time, you now created Al Capone, and organized crime and violence and corruption, and young people looking up to bootleggers as role models, and shootouts and violence in the streets. You look what's going on in Mexico today, or Central America, or the Caribbean. It's almost like Chicago during the days of Al Capone and Prohibition times 50. So much today of what people identify as part and parcel of the drug problem are in fact the results of our failed prohibitionist policies.
A drug-free world is a fantasy. The war on drugs didn't do away with people's desire for drugs. All it managed to create was a network of criminal supply routes to fulfill the demand.
En 2005, la ONU estimó que se manejaban más de $320,000 millones al año en el mercado ilegal de las drogas.
The UN estimates that almost 50% of organized crime's profits come from the drug trade. Eliminating this source of revenue would be a devastating blow to criminal cartels.
I am sure that regulation by the state with very clear limitation is the solution.
And then, of course, there are the financial benefits of regulation to consider. The saving on police and incarceration and the profits of taxation.
En 2008, Jeffrey Miron, economista de Harvard, calculó que legalizar y gravar las drogas inyectaría más de $76,000 millones a la economía de los Estados Unidos.
So imagine if we could turn this thing around across the board, and instead of wasting hundreds of billions of dollars a year, putting those hundreds of billions into the hands of criminals, bringing in the tax revenue instead. What a tremendous savings at a time when so many governments are facing really gross fiscal problems.
Un país que ya ha tomado ese camino es Holanda, donde la compra y venta de pequeñas cantidades de cannabis en las cafeterías es legal. Hoy, el expresidente brasileño Fernando Cardoso ha venido a ver esto por sí mismo.
You are not allowed to advertise cannabis. You are not allowed to sell any hard drugs. You're not allowed to sell cannabis to people under 18 years old. You're allowed to have only 500 grams in stock as a coffee shop, and don't sell more than 5 grams a day to one person. The good thing about the business in soft drugs and cannabis in the coffee shop is that it's without any violence.
And what have been the consequences regarding the users?
Well, people might think that it would have led to a sharp increase in cannabis use, because in practice it's free available cannabis. But you will see, if you look at the statistics, that the consumption is quite comparable with surrounding countries.
A pesar de las leyes liberales existentes en Holanda, sus índices de consumo son inferiores a los de países vecinos como Francia, Alemania, Dinamarca y el Reino Unido. Pero ¿se convertiría un mercado regulado legalmente en un gran negocio, así como sucedió en el pasado con el alcohol y el tabaco?
New Bel Air, so refreshing. Winston tastes good like it should. Change to Winston, you'll change for good. 'Cause Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
Look, no one wants a drugs free for all. We need to regulate and control how drugs are produced and sold. No advertising, no selling to minors, labeling dangers. And in fact, tobacco policy today actually shows how effective regulation and good education can be.
We need to regulate drugs the same way we regulate normal cigarettes. In many ways, those are great success stories. We've reduced use by half over a generation or two. If we could do that with heroin and cocaine, that would be a great victory.
The fact of the matter is, when a drug is really dangerous, smart education and smart regulations can reduce use very, very substantially.
E aí você tem que ser honesto na sua abordagem. Seja aberto, seja honesto. Diga isso, realmente a droga é fantástica, você vai gostar, mas cuidado, hein? Porque você não vai poder decidir mais nada, basta isso, basta isso. O grande perigo da droga é que ela mata a coisa mais importante que você vai precisar na vida, é o teu poder de decidir. A única coisa que você tem na sua vida é o seu poder de decisão.
Don't be drug-free because it's illegal. Be drug-free because it's the key to your freedom. It's the key to your future.
Tras un año de investigaciones, la Comisión Global se reunió en Nueva York para presentar sus hallazgos al mundo.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the press conference of the Global Commission on Drug Policy.
The fact is that the war on drugs is a failure.
The consumption is not being reduced.
It's cost millions of dollars.
The increasing number of people in jail is there in the statistics.
And it's fueled organized crime worldwide.
Stop the war on drugs, and let's be more constructive in trying to reduce the consumption.
But the strategy of drug prohibition has failed, according to the Global Commission on Drug Policy, an admission by world leaders, including 4 former presidents, a prime minister, and a former UN Secretary General.
Emitió un informe diciendo que organized crime and cost billions of dollars.
Drug policy has failed.
The most striking thing about the Global Commission is the media reaction to it. My God, it's off the scale. It's everywhere.
The message of the Global Commission came in the right moment and allowed a certain crystallization around this call for breaking the taboo all over the world.
Pero no solo los medios reaccionan. La Casa Blanca también tiene algo que decir.
When the Global Commission came out with its statement, I could have predicted in advance exactly what the drug czar was going to say.
We have spoken about our opposition to legalizing drugs because we know that legalizing drugs is not an answer. We also know...
I think essentially the role of the drug czar in America today is to refrain from any substantive debate about what's wrong with drug policy today. It's to point their fingers at the little signs of progress and ignore all the signs of failure. It's to make sure that this issue doesn't blow up one way or another for the president.
The incarceration approach to drugs.
En 2004, el senador Obama describió la guerra contra las drogas como un fracaso total.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
Sin embargo, como presidente no ha implementado grandes cambios. Y los recursos asignados a la policía son casi el doble de los destinados al tratamiento y a la prevención.
It was not a surprise to see the resistance because governments have to be more conservative. It's difficult for governments to change. They are afraid because of vote. They don't want to innovate. And the world requires more innovation. And the fact that now ministers and important personalities are joining us is a signal of progress.
There are dozens, if not hundreds, including people in power today who think the same way and don't feel the confidence, the political confidence, the personal confidence to speak out. But when you see this group of such distinction, people who left offices with their reputations intact, people who are oftentimes globally known, standing up and saying enough is enough, that hopefully can embolden others to say the same thing.
En 2011, el presidente Santos de Colombia se convirtió en el primer presidente en romper el silencio y declarar públicamente que hay que buscar nuevas soluciones.
Colombia has been fighting drugs and the drug cartels for 40 years. But the business is still going on. And sometimes I feel like in a static bicycle. You work hard, and then you suddenly look to your right, look to your left, and you're almost in the same place. And you see what happens in Mexico and Guatemala. And so I think a new approach, or at least to try to open up, to break the taboo, is what the world should do. There are many alternatives, including the possibility of legalizing drugs. Politically, I know that this has cost, and I have already incurred those costs. They have attacked me for saying what I am saying to you. But I don't think politicians or leaders of any country can only say what people want to hear. In Latin America, there is a growing concern. Before, this was a taboo, and you have to break this taboo. And the taboo has been broken.
Ahora, por primera vez en 4 décadas, los países que más han sufrido a causa de esta guerra contra las drogas están alzando la voz e iniciando reformas unilateralmente.
You have a situation where Latin American leaders of great stature in their countries, great stature in the world, can go to the United States and say, look, this is not working, let's do something else.
Estamos poniendo en la mesa un tema de debate. Ya fue una propuesta del presidente Cardoso, ya una propuesta del presidente Gaviria de Colombia y que ahí ha estado. Y lo que queremos es traerlo nuevamente al debate.
Por primera vez en la historia, en la Cumbre de las Américas de 2012, se anunció que la investigación de políticas alternativas contra las drogas formaría parte de la agenda regional oficial.
The truth is that the war on drugs is a war fought inside the heart and mind of everybody who thinks of using them. But I know that lives can be saved, that they're worth saving, that it's never too late to start. And as long as you have your personal freedom, the ability to think, you have a chance to do better. Don't give that freedom up. That's my message.
I'm not, how can I put, unrealistic. I know that it's difficult to change, but I know also the society does change. It will depend largely on people, on civil society.
We are now at the beginning of a new phase where the public debate will be possible. And I'm sure that will help to change the policy, not only in the US, but also in the world.
It depends heavily on people's pressure for governments to change. Altogether, we are breaking the taboo on drugs.
said I say